Hi everybody, welcome back. Today I want to just do a quick review of how we model consumer choice for my Principles of Micro students. And the idea here is that we are modeling how consumers make decisions about what to do and what to buy. We have this scarce resource, we're usually going to be modeling it as dollar bills, some budget, and we have all the things we want, and we have to pick what we're going to get. And what we found is that we're going to decide what to buy with our scarce resource of money by comparing a couple of things. We're going to look at price, budget, and utility. We want to remember we're always going to be looking at marginal utility, which is the idea of the additional benefit you get from consuming something. So maybe I want to look at the marginal utility of buying myself a book relative to the price of that book. But if I'm trying to decide how many books versus how many cups of coffee to get, then I want to compare it to the marginal benefit or the marginal utility of coffee relative to the price of coffee. And that's because I'm going to get different value and satisfaction from each of those goods, but they're going to cost different prices. And so to get a fair comparison, I want to look at how much satisfaction per dollar am I getting for either of these so that I make sure that the last dollar I spent sets them equal. If I'm getting more utility per dollar spent from books, I should buy more books and spend fewer of my dollars on coffee. On the other hand, if I'm getting more benefit from my marginal utility of coffee relative to the last dollar spent, I should take money away from books and put more money towards coffee until I get to the place where they're equal. And so we take this idea of marginal utility, we add to it this idea that most things we expect to have diminishing marginal utility. So each cup of coffee is going to be good, but a little bit less good than the last one, and maybe same for my books, and give that idea of those indifference curves. And our indifference curves are going to, let me graph one for us here. They're going to give us a measure of how many combinations of those two goods I can consume and have the same level of utility, the same level of satisfaction. So if I'm trying to decide between books and cups of coffee, for example, I might put them in here and say, okay, how much coffee do I want and how many books do I want? And usually there's some kind of average amount. Maybe I really want a couple of cups of coffee and a couple of books. If I'm over here where I have almost all coffee and almost no books, I'll be willing to give up a lot of coffee to get one more book. So maybe I'll go all the way here to get another book. And as I get further away, I'm going to be willing to trade less and less coffee for each additional book. And then as I get over here to this world where maybe I have almost all books and very little coffee, we're going to see that same relationship where if I've got all books and no coffee, I'll give up a couple of books I don't like as much to get another cup of coffee. But as I move along, I might change that trade-off. And so we're going to expect our indifference curves to be kind of shaped like this. And now it'll make a little more sense to demonstrate that diminishing marginal utility. So I am indifferent between all the points on this curve because as I move along this curve, I find, okay, well here I have a lot of books and very little coffee. So I'll give up most of those books or a bunch of those books for one more cup of coffee. But as I move along, those trade-offs are gonna go the other direction because I'm going to start to have more coffee relative to books. And so this idea is really saying that as we move from, say, one point to another, our trade-offs are going to be a function of this idea of a more balanced basket of goods. You kind of see how as I give up more coffee, I'm going to need more books to make me the same amount of happy, and vice versa. Over here, now I'm giving up a lot more coffee. You're gonna have to give me more books to make me as happy. And then over here, I'll end up maybe, let's see, what color can I use next? Here's a good color. Over here with this last bit of coffee, giving up my last bit of coffee, I better get a lot of books to make it worthwhile. So that's what those indifference curves are showing us, is that relationship. And we could go the other way and see the same thing. Here I'm giving up a lot of books for a little bit more coffee. But as I move along that indifference curve, right, from that point to this point, now the trade-off is a little bit more even maybe. And it's gonna get to the point where as I give up more and more books, I'm gonna need more and more coffee to compensate me for that trade-off, right? Does that kind of make sense? You see that shape in that relationship? If not, I'd say go back and check out the lecture slide. I'll link it in here for how all this works using the OpenStax textbook or whatever textbook you're using to understand consumer choice and indifference curves. I'm just doing a real quick, fast and furious example here of budget constraints and how we add them in. So we take these indifference curves and they map our preferences, how happy, how satisfied combinations of goods make us. And the idea is we have infinite indifference curves, all with the same general shape representing those trade-offs. And each higher indifference curve has a higher level of utility. But we know we can't afford every combination. We'd have one of everything. We'd have 100 of everything. So we have to add in a budget constraint to help us understand that. And so what we're going to do is I've got an example here. This is going to be my friend Rowan deciding between iced coffee and lip gloss. So she's going to have to choose between lip gloss and iced coffees. And she's going to have as our sort of starting point, I'm going to get rid of this title so I've got space to write our conditions up here, our assumptions. We are going to have a budget of $60. And we're going to have the price of iced coffee be $6 and the price of lip gloss be $4. And then we want to graph that budget constraint, remembering, of course, that our budget constraint is just the representation of what we can afford. And so if we have $60 to buy either iced coffee or lip gloss, then we can spend all our money on iced coffee and buy 10 iced coffees and no lip gloss. Or we can spend all our money on those $4 lip glosses and get 15 of them and no iced coffee. Or we can have other combinations. We can afford 8 iced coffees and 3 lip glosses, or 6 iced coffees and 6 lip glosses, or 2 iced coffees and 12 lip glosses, or any combination along there. But I'm going to want to go ahead and graph that here and look at what that will look like. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Sorry about that. What that budget constraint will look like for my consumer. Oops, there we go. So I'm going to have my endpoints of either 15 lip gloss and no iced coffee, or 10 iced coffee and no lip gloss. And so it's going to look kind of like this. That's about right. That's my budget constraint. And the idea here is that any point along this budget constraint is affordable. Any point below it is affordable, but we wouldn't want to be there because we want as much as we can get. We want to maximize our utility and be as well off as we can. And we can imagine a point that might maximize utility. And in a perfect world, we'd have beautiful utility functions that give us that trade-off, that marginal rate of substitution, the relative utility I get from my two goods, lip gloss and iced coffee. But for now, I'm just going to tell us where we're going to be, and then we'll go around and play with prices and income and see how changing the budget constraint alters our outcome, getting at that substitution effect and income effect. So let's say our optimal budget right now, or our optimal bundle, is going to be 6 and 6. We want 6 iced coffees and 6 lip glosses. And we draw a little indifference curve here that demonstrates those trade-offs. We're going to call that I1. And that's a basic, straightforward model. We see a budget constraint. We see that our optimal bundle has an indifference curve that's tangent to it, so it's the highest indifference curve we can get. Any indifference curve higher is not going to be touching. Any indifference curve lower is going to be a lower level of utility, and it's going to touch in different places because it's going to represent those trade-offs of the wrong combination of goods to make us happy. Then we can play around with stuff. We can play around with things like changing the price. So what if we change the price of lip gloss? Let's say the price of lip gloss goes up and is now $5. Well, that's going to mean we can buy less lip gloss. If lip gloss is $5, now the maximum we can buy is going to be 12 lip glosses with our $60. The maximum number of iced coffees we buy doesn't change, so we're going to see that budget constraint rotate in to a lower level. We can still buy a good amount of stuff, but when we shift that indifference curve in, we're going to see that we're going to be at a lower level of utility on a lower indifference curve. And what we're going to expect is that when we see that shift in, we're going to probably see our optimal bundle change. Because remember, the conditions for utility maximization were the maximum utility for one good per dollar spent. Let's say we're doing lip gloss and iced coffee now. And if we were here with 6 and 6, now we've seen the price of lip gloss go up. So that's going to mean that marginal utility is going to be a little lower. We're going to want to put more money towards iced coffee because it's gotten more affordable to get iced coffee for the same satisfaction and more expensive to get lip gloss for the same satisfaction. So what we're going to expect to see is this equality change a little bit until we find this new level of equilibrium that's going to be probably a little bit less lip gloss and maybe the same, maybe less, maybe the same or maybe less iced coffee. And so what we're going to expect is we're going to see a shift towards more iced coffee than lip gloss because of that income effect. And so you can kind of see it here. The numbers don't work out perfectly. If you look at sort of how this would go in order to make the budget work, we can do the marginal thing of econ and say, oh, well, maybe have half an iced coffee and a quarter of a lip gloss. But you know what actually works perfectly is would be to consume more iced coffee and maybe the same amount or less lip gloss. And so what we're going to expect is this higher price for lip gloss is going to do two things. We're going to have the income effect and the substitution effect, right? The income effect says, hey, higher prices make us feel poor. It represents a decrease in our purchasing power, which is like our budget getting lower. We feel poorer, we can afford less, we buy less of everything. The substitution effect, oh, that's not how you spell income, there we go. The substitution effect says, yes, higher prices make us feel poorer, but a higher price for one thing is going to mean we buy less of that one thing, and relatively more of the other. So we'll expect to see the change in lip gloss consumption be bigger than the change in iced coffee consumption because of that substitution effect. Does that kind of make sense? You get satisfaction from both. Maybe it's similar, but what happens is whatever your combination was, whatever your preferences were, one of them got more expensive without the quality or the enjoyment changing, because we're only changing one thing. And so you're necessarily going to want less of that now more expensive thing. The other thing we can do, besides just change a price, is we can also change our income. And when we change our income, we don't get a substitution effect. We don't have a change in price. We just shift that budget constraint out. So let me show you what that would look like. What if instead we had an increase in our budget? And instead of being $60, now we had, say, an additional $20. Now our budget is $80. Well, that would shift that original purple budget constraint out to a higher level, because now it would change not just our maximum consumption for iced coffee, but lip gloss, but also our maximum consumption for iced coffee, because we just straight up have more money. So if we have $80, we can go out and buy up to, we'll start with our original prices. If we had our original prices, we could buy a maximum of 13 1/3 iced coffees. I know it's not realistic, but we're just doing it to see what we can do. And with $80 spent on 13 1/3 iced coffees, we wouldn't have any money for lip gloss. Or we could spend all of our money on those $40 lip glosses and, on those $4 lip glosses. And we could have 20 lip glosses and no iced coffees. Does that kind of make sense? If we're going with those original prices, that's what we would see. We could do it with those prices too. Either way, we're going to see the effect of being able to buy more of everything. It's going to look something like this, where we're keeping the same slope that we had before based on those relative prices, but now we can get more of everything. And when we shift the budget constraint out, we are going to expect to move straight out to a higher indifference curve and buy more of everything. And in this case, with just the change in income, we'll expect the proportions to stay the same because the relative value and therefore the marginal utility per dollar spent will stay the same. So those are the two big effects that you can look at when you're looking at these models of consumer choice and how they play out in a consumer situation. So we've got this idea of the marginal utility, diminishing marginal utility, those indifference curves, our budget constraints, and then this idea of changing prices giving us two effects and changing income just giving us that one effect. So I know this was a little fast. I know it was a little bit quick and dirty, but hopefully this gives you a little bit of a second glance and a second review on this. And if you want more information, I'll go ahead and link the lecture from the OpenStax chapter on consumer choice to give you a little bit more background to understand this a little bit better. That's it for me. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.